2023 Bordeaux en primeur is well underway. A couple months ago, right after it launched, I did a video where I analyzed the 2023 Bordeaux vintage and identified 9 must-have wines that had been released and priced to that point. Since that time, there have been a number of additional outstanding wines that have been priced and released. So in this video, I'm going to supplement my earlier recommendations by identifying 11 best buys from the 2023 vintage. And these best buys can be divided into 3 discrete buckets or categories. First, there's some wines that sell for as little as $25 to $35 per bottle, yet offer exceptional quality at that price point, and which would make excellent cellar defenders for many people. The second category includes wines that sell for around $45 to $65 per bottle, but which absolutely crushed it in 2023. These are wines that compare extremely favorably to wines that may sell for $100 or more in some other regions. The third category includes wines that offer exceptional quality and are potentially candidates for wine of the vintage, yet which sell for a fraction of the price of some of the most expensive wines, such as the first growths. Back in the early 1990s, Margaux-based Chateau Giscours was in a bit of disarray. It was producing wines that were not at all comparable to the quality that its third growth status in the 1855 classification of Bordeaux would suggest. Their vineyards were in disrepair, and many of the grapevines were in rough shape. And so towards the end of that decade, they embarked on a substantial replanting program in the vineyard, and they actually replaced more than 100,000 grapevines. They also increased the percentage of Cabernet Sauvignon, and they switched from machine harvesting to manual harvesting. These initiatives all improved the quality of the wine and began paying dividends in the early 2000s. Since that time, Giscours has been on a roll and is producing exceptional wines. In my view, Giscours is an extremely underrated producer, and the 2023 vintage is arguably one of their very best vintages ever. The 2023 Chateau Giscours is 71% Cabernet Sauvignon, 23% Merlot, and 6% Cabernet Franc. This wine is maturing in 50% New French oak. The 2023 Giscours has a mixed black and red fruit profile. There's also descriptors that include forest floor, licorice, and violets. It has impressive acidity and a long, complex finish. Really a very enjoyable wine. This is a wine that's an absolute steal at $58 per bottle. It's been universally praised by critics, all of whom have given it quite lofty scores. This is a wine that once you take delivery of it, you'll probably want to give it another 4 to 6 years of additional bottle age before you start enjoying it, and you can drink it over the next 15 to 20 years after that. Located in Saint-Emilion on Bordeaux's right bank, Beau-Sejour Becot has historic vineyards that were first planted to vine by the ancient Romans more than 2,000 years ago. Today they have around 17 hectares planted to vine. Importantly, these vineyards are planted on the limestone plateau, which was an excellent place to be in 2023. Their vineyards are planted to about 2/3 Merlot and 1/3 Cabernet Franc. Beau-Sejour Becot matures the wine for about 18 months in 55% New French oak. Interestingly, they also mature about a quarter of the wine in clay amphora. They also have a brand new winery, and 2023 is the very first vintage produced in this new facility. Beau-Sejour Becot is a wine that I really enjoy, as it can be rich, but also have a silky texture and an elegance that I certainly appreciate. It's also another producer that's made some very strong wines of late. The wines that I would recommend are from the vintages such as 2015 and 16, 2018, 19, and 20, and the 22 is perhaps their best vintage ever, as it received a perfect score from Galani. But I'm also extremely bullish on the 2023 vintage of Beau-Sejour Becot and have a strong buy on that one as well. That wine is approximately 3/4 Merlot and 1/4 Cabernet Franc. This is a mineral-driven wine with a darker fruit profile and an incredibly long finish. It's also extremely aromatic due to the Cabernet Franc, which I really appreciate. You just can't go wrong with this wine. It's an absolute no-brainer at around $60 per bottle. Pomerol-based Les Glazes Clinay is undoubtedly one of the top estates on the right bank. But Les owner also purchased a property in the nearby Niat commune, which is located in Lalande de Pomerol, and which is only about 1 kilometer away from Les. Better still, Chateau Les Cruzelles has terroir that's quite comparable to that of Les because it has rich gravelly and clay soils. Les Cruzelles has around 10.5 hectares of vines that are planted to 60% Merlot and 40% Cabernet Franc. This is a very high percentage of Cabernet Franc for Lalande de Pomerol, but they still use about 80% Merlot and only about 20% Cabernet Franc in the top line. The 2023 Les Cruzelles received some impressive scores from critics, but sells for a very affordable $25 per bottle. This wine has a profile that's somewhat similar to Pomerol. Descriptors for this wine include red and black fruit, mint, cedar, spice, and tobacco. This wine is an absolutely phenomenal value at about $25 per bottle. I recommend buying this one in volume so that you can try some initially and then also see how it evolves over the years. Recently, I had the opportunity to visit with the winemaker for Pichon Longville, Comtesse de Lalande, which I'll refer to as Pichon Lalande for short. I asked him about the 2023 vintage for Pichon Lalande. He spoke extremely highly of the vintage and actually compared it to the legendary 1982 Pichon Lalande. The 1982 Pichon Lalande is one of my favorite wines, not just that's produced by Pichon Lalande, but indeed one of my favorite all-time wines. This 2023 Pichon Lalande received rave reviews from critics and sells for around $150 per bottle, but yet is definitely a candidate for wine of the vintage, even though it sells for a fraction of the cost of some of the first growths. This is a wine that was produced from organic and biodynamically grown fruit, and they used only about half of it for the top wine, so there was a fairly strict selection process. The 2023 Pichon Lalande is 80% Cabernet Sauvignon, 17% Merlot, and 3% Cabernet Franc. This is a sensuous, seductive wine that comes in at a very reasonable 13% alcohol by volume. Descriptors for this wine include lush black currant, blueberry, violet, pencil lead, licorice, and wet stone. There are silky tannins and racy acidity. This next producer traces its history way back to 1680 when it was part of the Beau-Sejour estate. At that time, the Beau-Sejour estate was quite large, but the owner was debt-ridden, and so they had to break up the large estate to help the owner satisfy his debts. As a result, at that time, several new estates were created, including Branaire-Ducru, which is a fourth growth in the 1855 classification of Bordeaux. Branaire-Ducru has about 60 hectares of vines that average about 35 years of age. These vines are located in Saint-Julien. The vineyards are planted to around 2/3 Cabernet Sauvignon, about 1/4 Merlot, and they also have smaller amounts of Petit Verdot and Cabernet Franc. Branaire-Ducru matures its wines in about 2/3 New French oak for about 16 to 20 months, depending on the vintage. The 2023 Branaire-Ducru is a blend that consists of about 61% Cabernet Sauvignon and 30% Merlot, with the remainder being Cabernet Franc and Petit Verdot. This is a wine that comes in at 13% alcohol by volume. This wine has impressive purity of fruit and a dark fruit profile, and also descriptors that include mint, tobacco, pencil lead, wet stone, and floral notes. This wine is absolutely one of the very best values in all of Bordeaux. It received tremendous critical acclaim for the 2023 vintage, yet sells for only around $45 per bottle. The next 2023 Bordeaux Best Buy comes from a producer that's classified as a second growth in the 1855 classification of Bordeaux, but yet the 2023 vintage of this wine sells for an extremely reasonable $62 per bottle. Henri Lerton purchased Brane-Cantenac back in the 1990s, and he subsequently made substantial investments in the 75 hectares of vineyards that are located in the Margaux appellation. These investments paid off beginning with the 2009 vintage, and in fact, Brane-Cantenac has had some excellent wines, and some of my favorites include 2015 and 16, 2018, 19, and 20, and 2022 may be their best ever vintage. Nevertheless, the 2023 is also well worth considering as well. Brane-Cantenac used only 40% of the harvest for its top wine in 2023, so there was a very stringent selection of fruit. The 2023 Brane-Cantenac consists of 77% Cabernet Sauvignon, 20% Merlot, and 1% each of Petit Verdot, Cabernet Franc, and Carmenere. Yes, Carmenere. This is a wine that was well received by critics, and the alcohol by volume is 13.7%. This is another Bordeaux that you can enjoy on the younger side, but will definitely gain some additional complexity with extended bottle aging. This wine features a profile that includes red fruit, violets, tobacco, and lead pencil. It has a medium plus body, it's well balanced, and it has fine grained tannins. It's definitely a wine that's characterized by elegance and finesse. If you're interested in wine recommendations, wine collecting strategies, and learning more about wine, please do subscribe to my channel. I've been collecting wine for more than 15 years and also have a level 4 diploma from the WSET. So I have both formal certification as well as substantial practical knowledge from the School of Hard Knocks. The next Bordeaux Best Buy is from another producer that I consider to be extremely underrated. Pavie Macquin has 15 hectares of vines located on Bordeaux's right bank in Saint-Emilion. It's located in an excellent area as its neighbors include Trollong-Mondot and Chateau Pavie. The vines average an impressive 40 years of age. Pavie Macquin has been making outstanding wine since at least 1998, and in fact, just a couple days ago, I tasted the 2000 Pavie Macquin, and it was showing exceptionally well. Despite the fact that it sells for an extremely reasonable $65 per bottle, the 2023 Pavie Macquin was highly regarded and received scores ranging from 95 points to 99 points from top critics who reviewed it. The 2023 vintage is a blend that consists of 82% Merlot, 17% Cabernet Franc, and 1% Cabernet Sauvignon. This is a vintage that's quite rich like usual, but it also has more freshness and vibrancy than Pavie Macquin typically has, and they did a better job with tannin management this year. The result is an extremely impressive wine. This is a wine that typically peaks 10 to 15 years after the harvest, but you can certainly hold it for 2 to 3 decades or so with no problem whatsoever. Next up is the 2023 Domaine de Chevalier. Domaine de Chevalier is located in Pessac-Léognan, and it's classified in the Grave classification. The 2023 Domaine de Chevalier received impressive scores ranging from 95 to 98 points, yet sells for a reasonable $63 per bottle. The 2023 Domaine de Chevalier is maturing in 40% new French oak. Descriptors include black currant, black cherry, forest floor, tobacco, pencil lead, and mixed spice. If there's a problem with this wine, it's that it's extremely structured and it's going to require at least 7 to 8 years of additional bottle age before it shows its best. For that reason, you may also want to pick up some of the 2021 Domaine de Chevalier. Despite the fact that 2021 was a challenging vintage in Bordeaux, the Domaine du Chevalier 2021 bottling was actually quite impressive and is one that does not need as much time before you dig in. The next Bordeaux Best Buy comes from an up-and-coming producer that's located in Saint-Estèphe on Bordeaux's left bank. This wine sells for a very reasonable $43 per bottle. Phelan Segur used only around 60% of the harvest for this top wine. This wine matures for around 18 months in 50% new French oak. Phelan Segur also had an interesting approach to fermentation for the 2023 vintage. Specifically, they used about 2/3 native yeast for the fermentation, and they fermented the rest of the fruit in commercial yeast. This sort of blending can add additional complexity to the wine. This wine has a dark fruit profile with tobacco, leather, cedar, pencil lead, chocolate, and floral notes. As with the Domaine du Chevalier, however, this is an extremely structured wine and one that's going to require some extended bottle aging before it comes around. But if you have some patience, you'll be well rewarded, as $43 is a very attractive price for a wine of this high quality. This next Bordeaux Best Buy is from a producer that's relatively unknown. The reason for that is because until recently, the wines were sold exclusively in France. But I've been singing the praises of this producer for several years now, and the wines have been slowly creeping up a bit in price, but yet this 2023 vintage still offers screaming quality at around $32 per bottle. Despite this modest price point, this wine receives scores from critics that range from 94 to 96 points, which is certainly extremely solid for a wine that costs a little more than $30 per bottle. Chateau Laroque is located in Saint-Emilion on Bordeaux's right bank. Some of its best vineyards are located near Trollong-Mondeau on the Limestone Plateau. Chateau Laroque uses organic farming methods in the vineyards, and this wine is a blend that consists of 99% Merlot and a splash of Cabernet Franc. This wine is matured in 50% New French oak. It's definitely a wine with some elegance. It's one that will certainly approve with additional bottle age, but especially given the price point, there's no harm in enjoying some of the bottles early. It's definitely a wine that you should buy in volume because 2023 is arguably the best vintage yet for this producer, and it's only going to continue to increase in price as the word gets out and people realize what a tremendous wine this is at a very reasonable price point. The 2023 Chateau Laroque has a mixed red, blue, and black fruit profile with lavender, lead pencil, mixed spice, and mint. The next Bordeaux Best Buy is another wine that's a candidate for wine of the vintage, yet sells for around $160 per bottle. Significantly, this wine has potentially 3 100-point scores, and it was definitely highly acclaimed by everyone who reviewed it. This wine comes from an impressive second growth Bordeaux producer that's located in Saint-Estèphe on Bordeaux's left bank. Chateau Montrose has significantly increased quality in recent vintages. Among other things, they've done that by using an extremely stringent selection process. For 2023, for example, they're using only 35% of the harvest in this top wine. More specifically, they're taking only the fruit from their best locations and their oldest vines and using that for the top wine. This area is called Terrace 4 and it has gravelly soils that are located on the riverbanks. The 2023 Chateau Montrose is a blend that consists of 75% Cabernet Sauvignon, 21% Merlot, and 4% Cabernet Franc. The plan is to mature this wine in 60% New French oak for around 18 months, and this wine comes in at about 13.5% alcohol by volume. This impressive wine features a mixed fruit profile with red, black, and blue fruit, also violets, licorice, earth, and wet rock. There's layers of flavor, ripe tannins, impressive acidity, and a long, complex finish. If you'd like to see my 2023 Bordeaux Vintage overview and learn the additional 9 wines that I recommend from this classic vintage, please be sure to check out the video that's linked above.